Hey, what's up everybody? What's good? I'm Joe, you're watching Matsu Excel, and this is going to be for all my content creators out there who are just starting and are looking to make some upgrades, and specifically my Nikon people. But let's talk about why. If you're a brand new content creator and you're researching different cameras, what to buy, what to upgrade to, you may notice that a lot of the big name brands are starting to cater for the entry level content creators. You had Sony release the ZV-1, you had Canon release the R8. Now you have Nikon releasing the Z30. Well, they've had it for about a year. And they're really trying to help that smaller market get into content creation. You have a lot of these brands that are trying to market for the up and coming content creators. Those that are still using their phones to create and to help push that new boundary and that at an affordable price. And that's what Nikon has done with the brand new lens, the Nikkor Z DX 24mm 1.7. That is a lot. Let's try this again. The Nikkor Z DX 24mm 1.7. That is not rolling off the tongue at all. Let's talk about some of the details about the lens. It is a 1.7 and it's a 36mm equivalent on a full frame. It is honestly a perfect walk around lens and also a good portrait lens, even on the DX body or on a full frame body. This lens is honestly new. It got announced about a month ago and released a shipping date maybe just about a week and a half ago. I was able to get this prior to my trip to Hawaii, and so I thought what better way to test it than to actually take it with me to Hawaii. This lens is actually the first Nikon prime lens for their cropped sensor bodies. That includes the ZFC, the Z50, and my personal favorite, the Z30. Now, you do get a lot of benefits for being under $280. However, there are some things to, some cutbacks. But I want to talk about why this lens I think is a must-have for anybody who has those cameras. And even if you have a full frame, you're looking to explore into the mirrorless game, it's still a potentially great lens to have. This is definitely a really good walk around street camera kind of lens. Also for portraits, especially if you're just getting into and you're looking to get into your first prime. I almost equate it on a crop sensor like a nifty 50. With any photographer, honestly, the lens is going to make or break you. The body is going to, the body is only half the battle. The lens and the glass behind it or in front of it is actually what's going to really help you capture a moment. When you're shopping for a lens, you really need to consider what your use case scenario is. For this 24mm lens, honestly, the best case scenarios I would recommend are street photography, portraits, and videography. And I put a little asterisk next to it because I really think for videos like this, where you have a tripod or even have a gimbal, it's beautiful, it's chef's kiss. But if you're running and gunning, you could potentially have an issue. So let's talk about what I think Nikon's aiming for the most, and that's video and content creation, especially with a lens like this. Nikon continues to advertise this as for content creators, especially those who are trying to up their game. And I think that's really where the aim is for and their market is for. A lens like this is really going to impact the beginning creator. And I think that's really who should consider this lens. Because this lens does not have any kind of image stabilization, putting it on the cropped body like a Z30, it did have some disadvantages versus the Z6. The Z6 has IBIS or in-body image stabilization built in, so that really helped reduce the visual shake while trying to hold and vlog with this. However, the Z30, even with its electronic VR, could not necessarily compensate for my weak arm. And yeah, I felt weak after carrying it, because if you look at these videos, whew, it was pretty shaky. All right, so I'm going to take the Nikon Z30 with the 24mm DX lens. I'm going to go through a farmer's market, do some street photography while they honk at people because they're going to crash. For a cropped sensor body like the Z30, you're going to notice that stabilization is lacking. Even with electronic VR, you're not going to necessarily compensate for that kind of jiggle. Now the camera itself is really light, and this lens is really light, but you could see even myself holding it, you can't be as steady as you want to. Check out some of this footage while I demoed both walking with it, holding it, and doing a kind of a vlog style shoot. Got this cool pineapple. Like, look how nice this pineapple looks. That is like legit. Got some garlic butter, got some jalapeno bread from a local bakery. So this is pretty nice as far as the come through. There's a lot of This is definitely probably the bigger of the farmers markets for sure, just because there's a lot of stuff to do. You got music that plays, so we'll test this lens and see just how it does with some of the players. But I mean, vlogging wise, like I said, I'm actually using this and holding this up against a post, so that way I can be steady as possible. I mean, you could use the electronic VR, especially if you're doing like two-hand kind of shooting and panning. However, you're losing some of the actual quality from the 4K sensor because Nikon will tend to actually crop down the image, so that way you're getting that stabilization in body, and it kind of always has this weird rolling shutter effect that I've never been a fan of. So I always recommend that if you have to use it, but if you can either like get a gimbal or something like that, I think that's really the combination that's going to take you way better than just the electronic VR. Definitely though, pairing this with a full frame camera that has IBIS, or if later on future iterations of the cropped bodies have IBIS in it, then definitely it's going to be a difference, and it's going to be a game changer, especially for that kind of walk and talk vlog. You can see a difference between using it on the Z6 with IBIS and just how well the stabilization holds up, especially for just hand holding. Now mind you, in this clip, in the past clips, I added no additional like after processing image stabilization. This is all just raw from the camera. This is not a review of the Z30 per se, because it's really just, I'm focusing on just the lens itself. But like if I was going to be vlogging and doing a walk and vlog kind of shoot, I would probably use the stock DX 16-55 lens. Yes, it doesn't have as much as the aperture and the bokeh effect. Because it is a wider lens at 16 millimeters, it allows you to compensate for that shake and more, especially when you get so tight after the EVR. You feel like your headroom is just totally cramped and all of a sudden you just can't get out. Yeah, I need a drink. Hey, let's stop for a second. Can you give this a like? It helps the algorithm, it helps people find me and who are looking for stuff like this. And honestly, it makes me feel special. So just give it a like, please. Thank you. Back to the video. I will say though, that using this lens on a tripod, which what I'm doing right now, this entire video, this talking head is recorded through the Z30 with this 24mm lens. And by God, it is the killer interview lens. It's the killer stream lens. It is the killer lens for being able to get a body and this lens for under $1,000. Ooh, content creators are gonna come up. Okay, enough video work. I'm also a photographer. I want to talk about photography. So let's talk about photography with this lens. Like I said before, combining this lens with a body like the Z30, it is the street photography king. Again, the focus is quick, it's sharp, and just, being able to find your subjects, I feel like it works faster on the Z30 than it does the Z6. Could be because it's released sooner. I don't know why, just the cropped sensor seems to have a faster focus than the full frame. So I did bring the focus down so it doesn't recognize like random faces in front of me while I'm recording, because I don't want the focus to breathe in and out. However, you can still see just the depth of bokeh for photography for something like this. And this can record up to about 8 inches away. And then how fast it'll pull to me once it recognizes my face. If I was going on a trip or traveling a lot like this one, and I want to be as minimalistic as possible, I would definitely take this lens and pair it maybe with something like the 24-70 f4. Since this lens is a native DX lens, when you put it on a full frame like a Z6 or a Z7, you're going to cut your megapixels in almost half. So for putting this on a Z6 where I would normally have 24 megapixels, I do go down to about 11, maybe 12 megapixels. Now, I've never personally had issues with that, especially when I'm printing a big print. I don't really think you have to necessarily worry about that. Now, if you have a Z7 or a Z7 II or even above like a Z8 or a Z9, then by God, get this lens now because you're still going to have 24 megapixels off the get-go. Versus like a Z6 or Z6 II, you may sacrifice some megapixels, but I still think it's worth it, especially if you're shooting between video and some photography as well. And you don't want to pay like $1,000 for a native 24mm. Honestly, this is a killer lens and a killer value. You're gonna get sharp photos, fast focus on the native Z mount, and your photos are gonna look good. Yes, of course, because it's a cheaper lens, cheaper glass, you may see at a higher aperture of like f11, where you may have some softer edges, but to be quite honest, most of the end users that you're providing those photos to will not notice a difference. And let's be real, we live in a world where everything's just scrolling on our phone anyway. Most of the time, it's gonna look sharp as hell on that little screen. But for those who are really the pixel peepers of the group, you will still be able to get by with this, honestly, and I think you're a fool if you don't consider it. And no, I'm not sponsored by it. I just love this lens. At the end of the day, I'm always gonna say, when you're shopping for a lens, really, again, always gotta think about the case scenario you're shopping for. Now, if money is no object, obviously you could buy bigger, more expensive glass. But again, this is aimed for beginning content creators, and so you don't want to break the bank. As much as looking at a 1.2 or 1.4 lens sounds great, honestly, upgrading yourself from a phone to a camera and focusing on a lens, this prime lens is honestly a great bang for your buck. As always, if you have any questions about this lens or just how it works with different bodies, leave it in the comments below. Or, you know what? Actually, if you made it this far, I would love to know what's your favorite pizza topping. And if you say pineapple, I won't judge you, but somebody else will. Please keep the comments positive. No, but for reals, I appreciate you guys for staying with me and checking out the channel. Make sure you give this video a like. It helps the engagement, it helps the algorithm get to more people who might look for this answer. Otherwise, subscribe if you like this video and you want to see more. But again, as always, I'm Joe. You've been watching Mouse to Excel, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.